Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about the final thing in the respiratory system. It's our fourth video. It's the effects of smoking. If you remember the first video, we talked about the parts of the respiratory system. In the second video, we talked about how gas is exchanged with the capillaries against the alveoli sacs and how carbon dioxide travels from the plasma in the capillaries through the capillaries into the alveoli sac, and oxygen travels from the alveoli sac through the wall into the capillaries and into the red blood cells, and how that blood then travels back and forth from the heart and to the heart. We talked about in our third video respiration, and that's how your body takes glucose and oxygen and does a chemical process on it to create energy, and that the waste products from that energy being made is carbon dioxide and water. We also talked about the fact that every cell in your body actually does that process. And finally, today we're going to talk about the effects of smoking on your lungs. Smoking, guys, does a number on your lungs. It is probably one of the worst things that you can do for your lungs. And I think I read somewhere that it's the number 2 reason for death in the world is smoking. First of all, cigarettes contain all kinds of horrible chemicals in them. Some of them are addictive. So, for instance, cigarettes have something called nicotine in them, and that nicotine is extremely addictive. Once you start smoking, you become addicted to the nicotine. It is in your blood supply, and you feel like you must have it and you need it, and so then you continue smoking. So once you start smoking and you get addicted to that nicotine, it is super hard to stop. So the number one thing I would recommend to you here at the beginning of the video is that you never ever start smoking. Don't even try it, guys. I know sometimes on TV they make it look cool. I know sometimes your friends will tell you that it's cool. It is not cool. You are basically filling your lungs with all kinds of horrible chemicals that eventually will destroy them. And it causes people to die slow and miserable deaths. So you definitely do not want to start. It is not a cool thing. Here's what smoking actually does to your lungs. The first thing is you'll remember in the first video we talked about your lungs are filled with itty bitty little hairs called cilia. And those cilia end up pushing mucus out of your lungs and pushing bacteria and dust and things like that out of your lungs. The chemicals in smoke over time will cause those cilia to stop working. They will no longer move. And therefore, you're not capable of pushing all of the bacteria and all of the, you know, dirt and quite honestly, all the smoke from smoking the cigarettes out of your lungs anymore. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then your body realizes that this smoke from the cigarettes are no good for you. And so what your lungs try to do is they try to capture it and get rid of it. So your lungs will end up making more mucus to try to capture the smoke and get rid of the smoke. Now, since your cilia are no longer working properly because you've killed them with the cigarette smoke and with the chemicals, that mucus has a hard time getting out of your lungs. And the only way now that you have to get it out of your lungs is to actually cough it out of your lungs. So that's, if you've ever heard of a smoker's cough, that's what causes a smoker's cough, is they're trying to cough all that mucus that contains all that smoke and all of that ick and all of those chemicals out of their lungs. Okay. The next thing down, you'll notice these get progressively worse as we go. After a while, you will develop chronic bronchitis. Your bronchial tubes contain a lining within them. Okay, and if those chemicals end up irritating that lining inside your bronchial tubes, and that lining becomes inflamed and ends up getting infected, and that causes something called bronchitis. It causes a great deal of coughing and difficulty breathing. Then, after a while, emphysema kicks in. Basically, the chemicals inside of cigarettes cause those alveoli gas collectors, okay, or gas sacs, to actually burst, okay, and they do not grow back, which means now you have fewer alveoli sacs to actually capture oxygen and pass it into your bloodstream, and to get carbon dioxide out of your bloodstream and release it, through your lungs and back up through your windpipe and back up through your nose. So once those sacs burst, you don't have as much surface area for air exchange. That causes coughing. It causes a great deal of difficulty breathing. It's like you're constantly It's kind of like you've constantly been running a race. You're breathing very hard all the time in order to try to get enough oxygen into your body to survive. And eventually, if it gets bad enough, they end up putting you on a permanent oxygen tank that you have to wear pretty much all the time in order to try to bring more oxygen into your lungs, pure oxygen, in order to try to get you to have enough oxygen in your body to survive. And then finally, these chemicals will cause the lung tissue in your lungs to make abnormal cells. And those abnormal cells then reproduce and divide and grow, and they end up replacing the good lung tissue. The problem with the abnormal cells, though, is that they don't work. That's why we call them abnormal. They don't function. And so all your good lung tissue now ends up being replaced with bad lung tissue that doesn't function. And we call that basically when good cells end up turning into bad cells and reproducing more bad cells and replacing good cells, we call that cancer. Okay? And you end up basically getting lung cancer. And some people are able to survive lung cancer, get treatment, and actually survive. Many people, unfortunately, are unable to survive having lung cancer, and they can die from the lung cancer. It requires radiation treatments and sometimes surgery and chemotherapy and all kinds of treatments that just are not very pleasant. So that's basically the last and most horrible thing that happens from smoking. And just to give you a yummy picture of the whole thing, you'll notice on the left-hand side, I've got a non-smoker's lungs. So these are the lungs of a non-smoker, and this is the heart of a non-smoker. So this is someone who died of some other causes. Their lungs were in good shape. And then on the left-hand side, you will see the lungs of basically a smoker and the heart of a smoker. And you'll notice it even affects the heart. You'll notice the heart over here is enlarged. It's actually larger than it should be. And that's because it's constantly trying to frantically pump blood through these bad lungs, trying to get oxygen into the blood, and it's having to pump super hard to pump the blood faster and faster to try to get the oxygen into the blood, even though the lungs probably aren't really capable of doing that anymore. I'm willing to bet the person on the left-hand side probably died of either lung cancer or emphysema or some sort of lung disease. So you can notice how black the lungs are. The smoke actually turns them black, the chemicals inside there. You'll notice up here you've got some growth, so it looks like they may have had some tumors. It's just not a very pleasant thing, guys. Don't smoke. And finally, on the right-hand side here, I wanted to show you a picture of basically lung cancer and how lung cancer works. Over here, these are some cells that have turned cancerous, which means they've gone abnormal. They no longer function properly, but they still reproduce. And they are slowly replacing the lung tissue around them, causing the lung tissue to no longer work. These cancerous cells can also eventually end up spreading to other parts of the body and causing other problems in other parts of the body as well. That's the end of this video, and again, I'm going to say it one more time because I just have to. The way to keep this from happening to you is to not start smoking in the first place. Okay? And if you do, unfortunately, make a poor decision and start smoking, stop smoking as quickly as possible, because the longer you smoke, the better a chance you have of having these issues.